Greetings, everyone. First question. We always hear statement, rather. We always hear that the personal is political. We hear that knowledge is power. But the question I have for you is, if knowledge is power, how is it that in knowing you're still not able to transform? See, you can transform your mind, but until you're able to take the material and transform the metaphysical, I'm not sure how useful that is. So many of you, like myself, have this quest for knowledge. You go in search, always looking for information or seeking revelation, but it doesn't really change much. What do you have to do? I'm going to read a little excerpt from The Guardian online, and then I'm going to jump or segue into what I really want to talk about today. The article starts out by saying that Patrice Lumumba was the first legally elected Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he was assassinated January 17th, 1961. And this heinous crime was a culmination of two interrelated assassination plots. And this article names America and the Belgian government as accomplices. Don't know how true this is. Don't know if this is collaborated. In this article, it said that someone named Ludo de Witt wrote a book on the subject, and it's qualified as the most important assassination of the 20th century. Did you hear that? The most important assassination of the 20th century. Look at the wordings here, very problematic. However, it goes on to say the Congolese politics since then and Lumumba's overall legacy as a national leader is something that continues to, be revised and reviewed. It said that the Lumumba's assassination is rightly viewed as the country's original sin 7 months after independence. He and his ideas became a stumbling block to the ideals of national unity, economic independence, and Pan-African solidarity. What he wanted to do was champion the hopes of millions of Congolese people for freedom and material possessions or prosperity. Let's go back to the top of this article. The point that I really wanted to make was, it says, when the atrocities related to brutal economic exploitation in Leopold's Congo Free State resulted in millions of fatalities, the US joined other world powers to force Belgium to take over the country as a regular colony. And it was during the colonial period that the US acquired strategic stake in the economic or enormous natural wealth of the Congo, following its use of the uranium from Congolese mines to manufacture the first atomic weapon, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. Now, this is very important to me. This article is very important in the sense that I'm trying to look at the movie that I just watched, the Black Panther, and to see some correlationship with this story and the one that is depicted in that story. Varianium, I think, the metal or material, precious metal that was in that movie that this king wanted to control and maintain for their use. Pretty much like this, the coincidence, this is too much of a coincidence actually, and I'm going to post this link so you can read it for yourself. But here they're saying that the uranium in the Congo mines was used to make the first atomic weapons. As we all know, Africa produces all these great minerals, these metals that the world seek after. Your cell phone without Africa, the soil of Africa, cobalt, for example, it can't be manufactured. So when you look at the Black Panther and you look at the attitude of individuals who are going out to see it, and I went to see it because it looked like it was a beautiful movie. And but when I watch and I listen to people talk about the Black Panther, I think they have missed the message. And this article, as you read it for yourself, you will see that a lot of answer lies in this, and that that movie itself is not as fictitious or as sci-fi-ish as people want to believe, but it's telling a true story. Also, I have heard various expressions about the individual who wrote or directed the movie, the predominantly black cast and black writer, and even costume maker, all black people. That is something for a lot of us to be very proud of. And individuals are critiquing the person who wrote or produced the movie, and say that it's those who are more conscientious are saying that it's a story that we have to be careful about telling our children. But I want you to understand that Hollywood is not a black industry. Up until recent, black people were still begging to be first of this or that, first to receive this or that award. It's not that long ago. So when a black person is put with the task of telling stories, black stories, because individuals understand that when the black face is shown telling these stories, it might be accepted by the people, but there are other underlying messages. And of course, in the Black Panther, there are many stories that are told, many messages that are relayed. And it's easy to judge the individual who wrote the movie and say, what you're doing is continue to spread the message of neocolonialism and all that stuff. But you have to understand that when you are given certain opportunity, if you belong to a group of people who are marginalized, you have to use that opportunity fairly and intelligently. And you can tell your story. You can operate covertly, which many people do, in order to get what they want. So the individuals who wrote the story, or who had power to control the way this was presented to the world, might be doing it covertly. In the movie of the Black Panther, you see the villain, an American born from an African person who actually wanted to see changes happen in Africa, wanted to control resources, wanted to use those resources for his or her own benefit, and the benefit of their people. The son father dying, and the boy not having the chance to go to Africa because his own uncle is the one who murdered the father. And I don't want to give away too much because there are people who want to go and watch the movie. But as I was there, first of all, I looked at it and I thought, wow, I saw those African people standing on what seemed like a city carved out of a rock, all dressed in their, African regalia. And this national pride sort of surged in me. I entered the theater feeling unwell, and suddenly it's like life starts surging in my body. I started sitting up straight. I was ready to receive. Cinematography, excellent. A score, or music score, brilliant. It was awesome. It really was awesome before you even start looking at the storyline. And then we are introduced to a villain. We're introduced to the king, who had to go through his process to become king because his father was murdered and he had to take over. And I got a bit confused because the individual who was considered to be the villain was actually the one who wanted the best for his people. And the individual who was considered to be, the hero, actually was just a handler. But that's the kind of black people the world wants to see. That's how black people are presented. And that's how opportunities are granted to individuals who have the mind of the king. See, the king is a selfish person. In the movie, the king had no concerns for other people around him, even though they lived on the same continent. The king was an elitist. The king was not about the betterment of the people. It's pretty much like what we see in Africa today. Now, please understand that those leaders in Africa who do want, to champion freedom, want to champion, growth and development and industry and hope and love and pride in his own people are often murdered, like Patrice or other revolutionary persons. So here we have Killmonger, and check out the name, Killmonger. T'Challa being the king has a real name, but this other one, you're already prejudiced by the name that is given to the so-called villain. But the villain happens to be my favorite person in the movie. The villain is the one who actually cared about himself and his people. And we're told, oh, he had some good ideas, but he was going around it the wrong way. Please help me to understand. All the other powerful leaders around the world who want power and control of power, and who want wealth and prosperity for themselves and their people, do they enter the other places in the world or enter other relationships with other person being docile? No, they don't. But the story coming out of Hollywood could not promote a hero who says, this is mine and I wanted to use it for my own benefit, because based on the article that I've read earlier, and if there's truth to this, this Patrice Lumumba wanted to use the uranium for the betterment of his own people, pretty much like this so-called villain in the Black Panther. But there's something that I noticed also, and I have to acknowledge it, that Africa has done great harm to its people, those in Africa and in the diaspora. When you really think about it, you imagine slavery and the atrocities of slavery, and you think that someone or individuals from outside came in, and if we want to assume that they just came with bayonets and they came with big ships and just grabbed people and brought them into bondage, that's not what happened. They've always used the African elite to do this to those who are less fortunate. Africa had its children taken into captivity. Let's just say that they were not participating and that they were innocent in this whole thing. Their children was taken away and scattered around the world. And what have they done to go back and get their children? See, other nations who have this kind of invasion or have these kind of attacks from other nations would not just lay down and leave their people in bondage. The United States of America would never do that. Canada would never do that. The UK, United Kingdom would never do that. Have their people taken out in captivity and not go back. So you see how the whole idea of this city where this king in the Black Panther is secluded, and when you look around them, four nations coming together for solidarity, meanwhile there's civil unrest around everyone else. It's pretty much the nation. And there's a part in the movie where the guy says that I'm not king of the whole world, really. He's king of this, imaginary, this fantastical place. I like the movie for the aesthetics of it. I like the movie for the fact that the black person is in control and of telling such a powerful story. I like the movie because of the imagination it allows individuals to have, and how it dismisses the idea that Africa is a shithole. Because if you're intelligent, you must know that can't possibly be, because Africa is filled with perfect minerals, wealth, abounding, South Africa and all these other places. Africa the Great. So they can't hide that story anymore, so they have to tell the truth. Now, in terms of the person who directs the movie, any criticism that comes towards him, I have to buffer that by saying that when you're in the master's house, you can't just do and say anything you please, or there will be repercussions. For somebody who's making movies and have the opportunity and the power to tell such a powerful story, it's best to tell it as if you are against the villain in order for the story to come out. Because this Killmonger guy, I don't understand how any black person who understands the truth could possibly see him as someone, as a rogue. How could he be seen? How could he be seen as a rogue? At the end of the movie, and I'm jumping forward, T'Challa goes to the United Nations and says he wants to do charity. Isn't that how it is now with our people? And so there is this uncomfortable, unhealthy relationship with Black America and Africans. And if you listen to a lot of these debates that goes on all the time, Africa feels resentful. Africans that go to America feel resentful. There's no connect, there's a disconnect. You know, sometimes they feel like they're treated terribly. Some of them are said to treat the Americans as if they're more superior. And there's this conflict. But what people fail to understand is that the division that exists is one that is orchestrated. And the problem is not the individuals who orchestrate this, but the individuals who don't understand that whether you call yourself African or African American or Caribbean or whatever, we are one people. You don't get the Asian people, you don't get Chinese people, you don't get European people to deny their heritage regardless of where they live. And so if people are more comfortable with saying, well, I'm black, well, okay, let's not say we're all Africans, but we are black. We are one people. Who has to explain that to us? The movie was troubling in a lot of sense for me. It was disturbing because black people walked away feeling this national pride about the wrong thing, the wrong message. You know, the idea that we're kings and queens. If you were already telling yourself that you were a king and queen, if you were already telling yourself that you're important, if you already knew that Africa was blessed with all kinds of beauty and minerals, if you understand the history and understand where people came from to go there and to do what was necessary for them to control these areas and these regions, then you wouldn't be so excited to see that there was a king and the royal family. You would have already known that this was Africa's history. What I loved the most, though, was to see how black women represented in the movie. The women were powerful. The women were very important to the kingdom, which is always the case. So when you go back to the agrarian society and hunting and gathering, women played a pivotal role. When you go back and look at the greatest warrior queens in Africa, you'll understand these women were fearless. These women were important fabric or a part of the African society until Europeans went there and tried to convince them that women were inferior, because that's how they saw their women. Black Panther, I liked it. I would give it 8 out of 10 for all the other things that I mentioned in terms of the aesthetics and performance and how convincing these individuals were, and the power of the women, and the story of how it unfolded in terms of how the men or the king depended on those women. But to show the Black Panther as the right choice, a man who was defeated and who was cheated of his crown of king based on seeing T'Challa coming back and reclaiming his kingdom. But the scene that was very touching at the very end, when T'Challa brought Killmonger to top of the mountain just to look at the sunset that his father used to tell him about. And then T'Challa tells him, maybe we could still save you. And Killmonger agrees or decides that he'd rather die than live in captivity. See, in the movie, they didn't ask the white man if he wanted to live. They gave him no choice. They just used whatever they had to save his life. But with his family, his blood relative, he asked him, well, he gave him the choice to say if he wants to live or die. That is very telling of who we are as people, as African people too, that we don't see the life of each other as essential, that we must do whatever we have to do to save that person's life. This is why there's so much violence in our communities. People taking each other's lives because it's not seen as valuable. Whereas the CIA agent who, supposedly saved that girl when he was shot, there was no question as if you want to save him. It was not a choice if you want to save this guy. He had to automatically live. Powerful movie. Very disturbing storyline. But it's Hollywood. The powerful will never teach the powerless how to take power from them. So, as beautiful as it is, and all the box office that hits broken records, that is, the story is still going out. The opportunity is still there. Individuals working behind the scenes to make sure that the dominant story remains, that the African cannot do anything unless he or she includes or invites outsiders. Very disturbing element within the movie. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. I hope I haven't spoiled too much for you. Stay blessed.